Hi, and welcome to Two CPAs and the Mic, the podcast where we talk tax, finance, and all things related to business. Whether you're a business owner, working professional, or someone who wants to start a career in accounting, this is the podcast for you. Hosted by CCK Strategies partners Jeff Fable and Sara Mays, we dive into relevant business and tax matters with working professionals to make these topics less intimidating, relatable, and dare we say fun? Let's get down to business.
Welcome to episode number 2 of Two CPAs and the Mic. Sara, we are episode 2.
Episode 2.
I mean, these are 2 more podcast episodes than I have ever done in my life. So
Ditto.
Same for you. And hopefully we have some return listeners. I don't know if we've received that. Remember that coveted CCK tumbler signed by Fable, Mays, and KP. We're not sure if that's been claimed
We
yet.
didn't tell Keith that yet.
Yeah. So anyway, but welcome to episode number 2. What we're talking about today is the CPA exam. You know, in short, what we want to talk about is what this exam is, how it's changed over the years, where it's going, how someone deals with that journey, because it very well can be a journey for most people, and what it means to somebody. And I think we've got some very interesting perspectives today that we actually have our first real guest with the mic.
Yes.
Our teammate, Keith Wigner. Good morning, Keith.
Good morning, guys. How are you doing?
We are
good.
so glad to have you today. Just a little bit good times. Yes. A little bit behind the curtain as we were planning this. In our first episode, Keith, we talked about CPAs and the stereotypes. And I'm sorry to our listeners, but we brought in a stereotypical CPA on this one.
Right?
No, we did not.
He forgot his pocket protector.
He forgot
today.
Yes. When we were talking about topics and guests, Keith, you came to mind. You are not only a valued teammate, but we knew that you would fit in very well with this crowd of hooligans that we have. Because I forgot to mention that we have our producer, KP, on the mic.
I've got to throw it in. What do I do best is ask questions. You guys, what is a CPA?
Well, we will get into that, Christy.
Okay,
we were talking first about Keith, but for our listeners, we want them to know we did not bring in a stereotypical CPA for this one to talk about the CPA exam.
But I will interject. A CPA is a certified public accountant.
Yes. So,
Thank you, Sara.
yeah, well,
Thank you, Sara.
I mean, this is an exam for special people.
Yep.
But we will get more into that.
We'll get into it. Yeah, I just wanted to know what the acronym was.
Reintroduce yourself, Sara.
I am Sara Mays. I am a partner here at CCK and have been here for 18 years.
And I am Jeff Fable. I'm a partner at CCK. I've been here for 25 years. And we are your co-hosts and guide through this amazing podcast today. But we are talking again about the CPA exam, different elements of the CPA exam and how it's changed. And we hope that our listeners find out some interesting thoughts, some entertaining thoughts, and maybe learn about themselves through this process, as well as maybe they can relate to the things we've experienced and that we've gone through. So, but as we start, as Christy pointed out, because she is our...
Hold on.
What did I forget?
Yeah, you forgot. We got to talk about who Keith is.
See, this is why I have co-hosts.
Keith, who are you?
I am along for the ride. Apparently.
all this time I spent on the outline,
Yes.
I just, goes to Pete. So,
Yes.
okay, back to the outline.
Back to episode
Back to
1.
the outline.
Rule follower.
Yes.
Keith Wigner.
So,
First of all, I have nicknames for everybody.
oh,
It was K-Dub
yes.
for Keith Wigner, but then we found out your real name is William Keith Wigner,
Yes.
and my mind started going crazy, like
Oh, because I've got something too.
Willie Dub or
Billy K.
Billy K. I mean,
I have been called Billy Keith before.
Billy Keith. That's a great Oklahoma nickname. Yeah.
Yes.
So K-Dub, I'll just leave it at that.
Yes.
Because
I like K-Dub.
this could be, Keith is in our CAS division, Client Advisory Services,
Yes.
and he'll get into that a little bit.
Yep.
But he could be, because debits relate to bookkeeping,
Yes.
he could be the debit dog.
Yes.
The debit dog.
DAWG.
Okay, this is a nickname we highlighted on the last
Call you
episode.
the debit dog.
Yes.
But as Sara said, DAWG, not DOG. So, Keith, in all seriousness, tell us who you are. Tell us what brought you to CCK.
So, I'm Keith. I have been at CCK for 2 years. Those of you that are doing the math on the 18 and the 25, these are my bosses.
We do not use the word boss.
Sarah used that term 18 years ago and it made me sick.
I know.
So thank you for bringing that.
That's just
We don't use
Yes.
that term in this building.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm here in the CAS department at CCK, Client Advisory Services. So our specialty over in CAS is all things financial statements is usually how I try to describe it to clients. So that is a wide spectrum ranging from what people traditionally think of as like bookkeeping services on one end of the spectrum, all the way to outsourced controller and CFO advisory type services, and then everything in between. So
how did you land at CCK?
yeah, I kind of did the traditional accounting career path backwards. I started in industry actually, and I had no professional or public accounting experience.
Right.
And I was with my current employer for about 9 years, and we might get into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't want you to spoil your story because I understand. I don't know the story, but it's pretty good.
But
Well, can I pause you because
Yeah.
you broke a little bit. So let's talk about what industry is versus what public
Great.
accounting
Sarah.
is. Because you mentioned you were in industry, and
Yep.
we are a public accounting firm. So I'll set the stage with public accounting. Public accounting usually deals with tax, client advisory service, and assurance, and we are dealing with the public. But what's industry?
so industry is, what most people think of when they see a business. And so there is a business owner or conglomerate of shareholders, and there is a accounting, reporting, and compliance need within that company. And so
Solely within that company.
solely within the
Yes.
company. And so industry is the staff that has a responsibility to fill those functions within the company. So the work life and workflow there is different in that they are only concerned with that one company and that one set of financials. All of their deadlines and workflows are only pertaining to what that specific entity needs.
Right.
And there's some pros and cons to that.
There's a whole other podcast episode,
It
really.
is.
Yeah, it really
is.
is.
It
Yeah.
really is.
And the way
Podcast idea.
Yeah. So we need to start taking these down. So the way I usually say it is CPA firm is public,
Right.
industry is private.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So
And
that's
if you're
the
dealing
distinction.
with-
Yeah.
private, you're dealing with
But
one
let's go
person.
back.
and
When
public
I
is
hear
multiple.
public, I think of a publicly held company.
Right.
CCK is a privately held company.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. We are owned by a partner group. But I would say that you're serving multiple clients in public accounting.
Right.
Yes.
And
Okay.
that's- yeah.
I digress, but I wanted to
That's
make sure
important point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to
Yes.
make sure we distinguished the two. Okay. So you were in industry for 9 years.
Yes. So I worked for a small local medical billing and other medical industry related company. And I started there as a bookkeeper. And how I even got to that job was a bit of a mess. But when I left, I was a controller. Ultimately, I left because the company closed. We don't need to go into the details of that. It's
Did
not
you
a
cook
happy
the
story.
books?
I did not cook the books. I did not cook the books.
That's okay. We can edit that out.
Ultimately there was a difference between the amount of money coming into the company and the amount of money going out of the
It's a
company.
very
That's usually what
That
when you
is-
close.
yes.
Yes.
So I needed a job, and it had been 9 years since I had looked for a job, and I knew somebody, my wife, who knew somebody, her coworker, who knew somebody, that coworker's husband, who knew somebody who was Belinda, the director of the tax department
Yes.
here.
Yes.
So I passed my email through, or my resume through that list of people that I knew. Ultimately, it made its way to our fantastic producer, Christy Porter.
Thank you.
Who also does recruiting.
Yes.
I used to do recruiting.
She used to do recruiting.
Thank you.
Now
for clarifying.
she bosses around the recruiters.
Yeah.
I do not. They know more than I. We all know that. I don't do anything.
So that's how you got here.
That's how I got here.
You know, I mentioned in the last podcast about how CCK is a place to land, and everybody has their own story, and you've got a good one, I think. Just briefly, Keith, how old are you? I know I'm breaking all kinds of...
Wow.
That's all right.
You don't
But
have to
you're
answer
right.
that.
How,
You don't have
I
to
think
answer
the
that,
audience
Keith.
needs to kind
Are
of
you
get...
going to tell me how old you are?
I'm 55. I already
Right.
did.
And I'm 46.
All right. I am 37. I'll turn
37.
38 in a couple months.
And because I think this is important to the story,
Yes.
meaning that everybody that takes this exam, I really want listeners to connect with us from the perspective of how does their story connect with our story and be an encouragement. So, Keith, how many kids do you have?
I have two children.
Two
I have
children.
a 6-year-old, soon to be 7-year-old, and I have a 2-year-old, soon to be 3-year-old.
Because that's going to be extremely important to remember when I kind of talk about my story with the exam a little bit. So,
Same.
okay.
Yes.
All right. So, Keith, we're really glad you're here. So let's kind of dive into this topic of the CPA exam.
Yes.
First of all, let's talk just a little bit about what it is. And I think this is what we wanted to do like 5 minutes ago, but we finally have got the spot for it. But the CPA exam does stand for to be a certified public accountant. And there's a couple different myths and fun facts about this exam. And Sarah, I think you've got some of those. Do you want to do that? I mean, the first thing from a myth perspective, and I'm not sure it's a myth, but the reputation of the exam is that it's one of the hardest exams to pass, because in order for you can be an accountant just by going to school, but you cannot be a certified public accountant unless you pass this test. You could be what they used to call a PA, which is a public accountant, and they had a test. But the CPA exam is, the history of it is that it's one of the hardest certification exams to pass. And when we talk about certification exams, we're talking medical, engineering, the bar. And so it's got that reputation of being extremely hard to pass. And you can only do certain things as an accountant if you have the exam. So for example, you cannot do an audit if you're not a CPA. You can do tax returns if you're not a CPA. You can do tax returns if you're an enrolled agent, but the CPA sets us apart from other professions and other professionals within our industry. So Sarah, did you have some thoughts on that?
I do. And I agree. It is a very grueling exam, but I mean, at the end of the day, completely worth it for those who do attempt to take the test. But I do have some, actually, Jeff called them fun facts, but they're
real facts.
They are actual facts.
First, let's just go back and say that the AICPA, which is our national standards setting board, they initiated this exam in 1917. So we're a little bit over 100 years old. So Sarah, why don't you share these real facts with us?
Right. And
let her talk.
And then also with the AICPA, there is another board that actually monitors the exam. It's NASB, the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy. And they are the ones that actually issue the exam, grade the exam. And it's not, and I'm not going to even try to explain how they grade the exam, but it's not a
True,
pass or
false.
fail.
Yeah.
It's not there is, and we'll get into how you actually take the exam and the contents of the exam and the format, but it is a very weighted exam score. And so it's based on who's taking that particular section. And I'll get into that in a second, but section at that time. So it is a very interesting methodology of how it's graded. But the facts that I have are as of the end of 2023. So they do issue the exam results by quarter, but I wanted to get the whole annual in here. And these are NASB facts just for the state of Oklahoma. So in 2023 Q4, there were 357 candidates that sat for the exam. And of those 357, 104 of them were brand new candidates. So in that Q4 of 2023, 104 people were taking that exam for the first time. And to get into a little bit of it, before jumping the gun a little bit, there are 4 sections of the exam that you have to pass. And so one of the cool things here on the facts is Out of that 357, only 48 of them that quarter passed their fourth section. So, I mean, that is a very low number. The cool thing is the average age of somebody sitting for the exam in Q4 was 31. So their average age of those 357 candidates was 31. So you've got some young ones, but you also got some older ones. And the pass rate for the percentage of people that passed one section is 38%. Now, this is a 2-year window. There were some that had 51%, and that was in 2022, the second quarter. So it's a
Sarah, is this by state or
this
nationally?
Is Oklahoma.
Okay.
Just straight Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah, this is for Oklahoma. They do have the national statistics, but I did want to focus in on just Oklahoma.
So I find that very confusing, to be honest.
Okay.
And we're going to get into like the differences. When I took the exam, it was like you passed or you failed.
Oh,
Yeah.
And so it's great. And I mean, what you were saying was confusing. I'm saying what all that mumbo jumbo is confusing and it's got to be difficult. Maybe not if that's what you start with in your experience, but from what I experienced, it's confusing. But it's not just a true false ABCD. You know, there's a lot of different things that go into it.
One exam.
Yeah,
You're taking 4 exams, but
well, we're going to get into that.
Let's see. You guys have had a very interesting journey. I can't wait to get there, but I think it's going to make more sense after we hear that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
Well, and I think one other layer of complexity to, we're talking about this from the Oklahoma perspective, but, so we've talked about the AICPA, we've talked about NASBA, but then in addition to that, every state has its own accountancy board, which is technically responsible for issuing the certificate.
Right.
And my understanding is each state accountancy board has some level of flexibility on the prerequisites and requirements that they can require, and I think they all tend to
which is where
similar
reciprocity comes into place. Right. And if I want, as an Oklahoma CPA, to do certain things in Texas or Pennsylvania or whatever, there's communications and interactions between those two in order to practice there sometimes. So it's a fantastic point, Keith. Fantastic point.
All the stats that you're talking about are from Oklahoma.
That's right.
From the OAB, as we lovingly call it.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and I mean, I do have actually in this report, there are other states.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, Texas, the candidates that sat in Texas, I mean, obviously so much bigger than Oklahoma just because of the size. There were 3,700 people that sat for the exam in the full year compared to Oklahoma for the full year, for Q4. It is 3,700 for Q4. And then the average age was also 31.
Which is, we were talking about this before we started, just the concept of the average age of a CPA is somewhat mind-boggling because it's actually a growing, it's not necessarily a growing profession, but the age is so much, the average age is so much higher than some of these other professions. And quite honestly, one of the things that the profession may be struggling with is how do you engage those younger, and how do you engage the Keith Wigners to get involved in high school, in college, so that there's this younger wave coming through.
Absolutely. And on that, the average age, and this is just something I Googled, but the average age of the CPA in the United States is 52 to 53 years old.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we definitely need to attract and show, kind of break down the stereotypes of the CPA exam and the fear.
Which is why I think hearing our stories is going to be interesting for people. So let's jump into that. And we're going to do this kind of round robin style, where I think one of the things that's going to make this very interesting to people is we have 3 completely different perspectives. I will call myself the boomer.
Although he's not, he's a Gen X.
55. I am a proud Gen Xer.
Yes.
So we will get into that another day. But I'm on the old side of the Gen X.
I'm on the young side of the Gen X.
And Sarah's on the younger side. And then Keith's the millennial, but he's also the newest CPA in our firm. Correct?
Correct.
Yes.
I think so.
Yep.
So
We do have people that are sitting.
Correct.
Absolutely. We always have people are sitting, but Keith is our most recent passer.
And we'll talk about kind of what the term sitting means, because it does have its own connotation in this process. But let's start with what made you decide to take the exam. So I came out of school in 1991, and by school I mean college. I vividly remember the day. Well, I got to take a step back. Okay, how did I get into accounting? And I told my wife I was going to say this and tell this story. But how did you get into accounting? Well, in high school, I had a crush on the accounting 1 teacher.
Oh, you had, hold up. You had accounting in high school?
I took accounting 1 as a junior.
Wow.
Well, let me put it this way. I took accounting 1 as a junior and had a crush on my accounting teacher. Hope she doesn't listen.
That was before I was born.
Oh,
right?
Thank you. Yeah. This was 1986.
It was
So
this was actually before.
I know. Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
So
I had to get it in.
anyway,
I could probably tell you the top 10 music.
Yeah, right.
in that time.
I would tell you 86 was when the 80s started to
It
decline
really did.
from a music perspective.
Well, you got to look at it from a different perspective.
That's another episode.
all right.
So anyway, I had this crush on my accounting teacher. Long story short is this teacher ended up being the best friend of the teacher that my wife did her student teaching with.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Small world.
Okay.
Yeah. So she comes back the first day, and I'm like, if you even tell your oversight teacher that I had this crush, I will die. She goes, oh, don't worry. She already knows. And I was mortified. But anyway.
That's awesome.
But
Do you consider yourself a subtle person, Jeff? Or
I'm vulnerable.
okay,
I'm vulnerable.
all right.
So anyway, no joke. I mean, that's kind of what got me involved in accounting and accounting too. And then I was like, well, I don't really know what I want to do, and this seems to click. So I went and took accounting and got my degree in accounting in college. And I had a conversation with my dad as I was getting ready to graduate, and I said, I don't want to continue to go to school. And he said, well, if that's the case, you need to differentiate yourself. And basically, the CPA exam was the way to do it. And so that's how I made the decision to take the exam. Sarah, what about you?
Mine is hugely, vastly different. So I have to tell the whole story, but I'll try and keep it brief. When I first came out of high school, I wanted to be an electrical engineer. And that lasted 1 semester. and then I knew, then I went into a couple of different degree, or went down that path, and I didn't like any of it, and I couldn't get settled. And then my husband and I got married. He had already graduated from college, and I was still in the middle of it, but he was adamant that I finish school, and it didn't happen that way because I'm stubborn. And not me. And so I went back to school. I was going to school to get my teaching degree and in elementary education. And I got pregnant with my first daughter. And then after I had her, and about a year later, I was like, I'm ready to go back to school, and I wanted to be a pharmacist. But in that pharmacy degree path, one of the requirements was taking accounting. And I took accounting 1 and fell in love. And I was like, that is what I want to do. Well, then I got pregnant with my second daughter. And so I had to drop out of school. And then life took us on a journey, and we ended up back in Oklahoma. I started work at CCK. And part of my journey, I had worked at another CPA firm, and came to CCK and was like, oh, this is what I want to do for sure. And so I finished my degree, and then I was like, you know what? The next step, and I love where I'm at. I love where my career is going. So I want to enhance that, and decided to sit for the CPA.
So Sarah, I think that, could we say you were non-traditional?
Oh, 100%. Okay. Absolutely. I did not go from school straight into...
Which a lot of our listeners can certainly relate to.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Great story. Okay, Wiggs, what's up?
So there's some similar themes in my story to both of what you guys have said.
Outside of them being your parents' age?
Yes, outside of the fact.
And you had a crush on your accounting teacher too?
No.
Okay.
So if I did not take accounting in high school, I was homeschooled in high school. So I for sure did not have any crushes on my teacher. Will make that very clear.
Okay,
right
so
now.
why don't you just keep going with that?
Yeah.
Let's
Tell us
keep
about
going.
the issue.
Anyways, when I first went to college, my goal was to be a mechanical engineer.
What?
My dad is an engineer. His dad was an engineer.
You wanted to continue the legacy.
Broke the trend. It was a rough time in my life. Ultimately, I ended up moving. I'm not from Oklahoma originally. I am from Jacksonville, Florida. And so
Interesting.
I needed kind of a reset at that point in my life. And so I moved out here to go to Oral Roberts University, which for those of you that don't know is a local college here in Tulsa. And I really had no idea what I wanted to do or who I wanted to be in life. And so I got a marketing degree. And if I'm honest, I took as few accounting courses as I could. I was I'm pretty smart, I think. I understood all of it conceptually, but I did not like doing homework. And so
Which is slightly
Who does?
important.
yeah, it is slightly important. And so I had relatively bad grades in my accounting classes, generally scored well on exams, but then had a bunch of missed scores when it came to weekly assignments and things like that.
Do your parents know this?
Oh, they were very aware. They were very aware. They were also not
So the
happy.
truth isn't coming out.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
no. So I graduated with a marketing degree and I got a sales job out of college and just immediately got my teeth kicked in and was very clear I did not want to do that. I got let go from that job, which was a life-changing experience. I was newly married. I mean, like brand newly married. And I got a job working with a college buddy that knew the guy that ultimately would end up being my boss at that medical company. And I had a sales job there, proceeded to once again get my teeth kicked in. And I officed next to the lady that was the office manager for this medical company, which was new and kind of a startup at the time. And she came to me and she's like, "Hey, you're probably going to get fired.
Well, that was
I have a bookkeeping job.
Oh,
Do you
okay.
want to do that?" And I said, "Yes, please. I need to put
I need money.
food on."
Yeah.
Yeah,
The job is
I will
good.
do that.
I'm newly
Right.
married. Yes.
And it was a great fit for me. And I loved it. It was something I like embracing new challenges. It was something new for me to embrace and sink my teeth in. And so I really enjoyed it and embraced that. And that was the point at which I kind of changed my career trajectory. So having said that, when we're talking about the CPA, I reassessed. I have a marketing degree. On my resume, I do not look like somebody that would be hireable within this profession. And so I was looking for some sort of validation for my skills. I did not want to go back to school and get an
master's
accounting
degree. Yes, right.
degree. And so the CPA was what I landed on to try to
Kind of
boost my
similar,
resume.
to what the reason why I did. It was to differentiate yourself. So, and I think that story is going to continue as we continue through these various topics. So the next issue is what were the qualifications for you to sit for the exam? Because those have changed over the years. From my perspective, I could take it right when I got out of school. So I got my bachelor's and I was able to basically go right in and take the exam. I didn't need job experience or additional hours like you kind of do now. So, but mine was pretty simple. You have a degree, you go. What was it when you took it, Sarah?
So when I took it, you had to have 150 credit hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also had to have 2,000 hours of job experience. But it didn't matter where you got your job experience. So I obviously working at CCK and my other CPA firm, I already had the hours. the 2,000 working hours,
Okay.
but the 150. And if you'll remember earlier on when I said I had many different degrees or degree paths, it was easy for me to get my 150 after. So, normal college credits is 120 to get your bachelor's degree, right around 120. And then so getting that extra 30, a lot of people take and get their master's degree to help get that extra requirement. Well, I just needed to just take a few more classes to hit my 150.
Okay.
Did they have to be upper division accounting courses?
They did have to be. There's a certain limitation on, they have to be upper division, and so many of those 150 hours have to be in accounting specific.
Did you say the 2,000 hours, Sarah? Did you
2,000 working hours.
Did that have to be in an accounting environment, or could that have been at any place? Just
no,
being
it
employed?
had to be in an accounting environment. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Keith, when you last told us about your story 1 minute ago, you have this option of whether you go into this different realm of the job, and which really kind of had something to do with what you studied in school, but not really.
Yeah.
Your resume was not your typical CPA candidate resume.
Mm-hmm.
What did you have to do to get from where you were to being eligible to sit for the exam?
Yeah. So let me preface this by saying I was flying blind. This was all something that was self-led on my part. And some of these things I was good at researching and planning out. And some of these things I learned the hard way. And some of them, I think there was some providence intervened. So I did need to go back to school. And I was trying to figure out when I did that. I went back and took classes at NSU, which is another local school here in Oklahoma. And I think I went and started taking classes there around 2015. Mm-hmm. And so I was taking those just as I had time in the evening. I did not have kids at the time. And I took some summer classes. And so I also needed 150 hours. Mm-hmm. What I did not have a plan for was the professional experience requirement, because while I was working in accounting, part of that requirement is you have to get a CPA to sign off and verify you completed this work.
Yes.
And we did not have any CPAs at my company.
Oh, okay.
And so I did not have a good plan for how that was going to sort itself out. And so my just first goal was pass the test, and then I'll figure that out when I get there.
And just to put that 2,000 hours in perspective, that's about a year's worth of work. About a year's worth of
great
work.
point.
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah. So, but backing up, that is something that has changed. I don't know when the change was, but the requirement used to be less college hours and two years of professional experience. And I don't remember when that swap happened.
Probably sometime between Fable taking and when I took.
Yeah. So around the Civil War.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, and the main point here is that there is a process that you do have to go through in order to be able to sit, which is the terminology used in our industry for the exam. And you can't, sign up for the exam until you've documented that you've done that kind of stuff. So, okay. So at this point now, we have decided we're going to take the exam, and we've qualified to sit for the exam. What was the study process that you went through? So for me, and I think this is something that may transcend all stories just to a different degree. Mm-hmm. My experience was with Becker. I took the Becker CPA review. There's several different ones out there. Mine was in person. You went to ORU, or Roberts University, on Tuesday and Thursday nights, and you sat through a presentation, which was basically I remember it being almost like a video. It wasn't like that specific instructor, but you had workbooks, you had homework, and there was a quote unquote, and just keep in mind, we're not sponsored by Becker or anything like that, but there are other review courses out there. But again, mine was in person. there was homework, and there was kind of this deal that if you completed, a certain percentage of your homework, you could take Becker again for free if you did not pass the exam. Because
the Becker promise.
The Becker, it's kind of like the Jeff notes that we talked about last, the Becker promise. So, and you got to understand that we talked about the pass rates earlier. The general thought process is that, at least the way I took it, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but you were not going to pass the whole thing the first time. And so to me, that was important that I could take Becker again. So I actually, in the cramming period that we all experience, I remember spending more time the night before making sure I got to the percentage of my homework than studying for the exam, because I knew I wanted to take it again. So, but mine was Becker, and I did not pass the first time. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. I went back the second time, and I remember it was going to be basically the same thing, other than they would update the tax presentations.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the first one. I sat through half the class and said, I cannot do this again. And I left and didn't go back. And I just got the updates on tax. But that was my process. Sarah, what did you do?
Yeah, I also used Becker. There were options, though. You could do in-person, a live course, or you could do self-pace. And I opted to do self-pace. At that time when I was studying, I had 2 girls and a husband who needed some of my attention. So I wanted to be able to be flexible with when I could study. So it was web-based. So you could log in and you could monitor, because it was still the same. You had the Becker promise. You had to finish a certain amount of the webinar videos, and then you had to also finish a certain percentage of the questions. So you would watch a video segment and answer questions and it was kind of quiz style, multiple choice. And it was very, very much very boring. I mean, just to say the least. It was hard and grueling, but I'm glad I did the self-pace, because if I wasn't in a good headspace to be studying that day, I could pause it and pick it up where I left off.
Sarah, how did you go in? Did you go in thinking, I'm going to pass this my first time? Or did you have the backup plan of, well, I'm going to do my homework, or I've got the Becker promise? How'd you go in?
Okay, well, also tell the story of I did not take the exam all in one chunk, because, Christy, I went into it very, very cocky, thinking that
this is why I asked the question. A little different approaches. And
yes.
Yeah.
I thought I would pass it on the first time. And although I knew it was a very hard exam, I thought I was a good test taker. And notice I said thought, and then I took the first section and I aced it. I think I got like around an 80, which we'll get into scoring soon.
Yeah, so format. Absolutely.
All right.
When you were taking this, was it offered as you take the whole thing at once? Or
we're going to get into that.
Yeah, we're going to go into format in a minute.
So I did take it, passed, and then I started studying for the next section and completely bombed it and got like a 45 or 46 on my second exam. So the exam process is the study process is very, very, you really have to pay attention to the material.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Keith, what'd you do study-wise?
So I also took Becker, and going back, I was completely flying blind. I knew there were different study curriculum options, but I didn't really know anything about any of them. At NSU, where I was taking classes, I went to like a weekend extra credit. Different speakers were coming.
Okay.
And there was a sales rep from Becker that came and did a talk for us. And she, at the end of her talk, she was like, hey, I know a lot of you guys work for places that'll reimburse for, curriculums and everything. If you don't, come talk to me and I'll give you like a coupon code. And so
coupons are good.
I took my hindquarters right up there and talked to her and said, I need that. And, I got like half off the curriculum.
Oh, wow.
So I was very excited, but I went back and looked at this last night. I purchased Becker May 11th of 2018. And then August 5th of 2018 was a pretty significant day in my life because that's when my first child was born. And that's when I basically stopped caring about the CPA exam for a long time. So I got back on progress. I took my first test May of 2021. So 3 years later. So, but that's it took me a while to get back in that frame of mind. And then I did not pass that first test. We could talk more about that later.
It's okay. You were testing.
I was
all that
testing.
mattered.
So you took it live at NSU?
No, I took it at Prometric, which...
No, I'm sorry, the study, the Becker course.
No.
You didn't.
No.
Oh, it was just offered through NSU.
Yeah.
The Saturday seminar.
The Saturday seminar.
Yes.
The lady was talking to NSU students.
I see.
Yeah.
So you still did it.
I had the
web-based.
online curriculum,
Yes.
which honestly, I will say we're not sponsored by Becker, but I found the curriculum to be extremely helpful for somebody that was self-paced. It's this conglomerate of bite-sized videos that, have an accompanying textbook. And then there's multiple choice questions that you can go through. And then there's also, they call them task-based simulations. We'll talk more about that. But long format problems to work through. And I found that very helpful.
And I mean, and going back to, because I know with our outline, Jeff's awesome outline, I know where we're going next. But the cool part about when I took it, and I don't know if it's still the same, you could put in your test when you wanted to start studying and when your test window, when you wanted to take your testing window, and it would generate when you should finish each module before, to ensure that you were able to finish finish the study material before you finish the exam. And they also had sampled tests, and so that you could actually sit and take a test to prepare.
I think this is just going to be one of those eye-opening things for someone that's listening, how the different journeys go. There are common themes, but I will tell you that I started in on testing right after I got out of school. And I didn't stop until I passed.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I had no kids. And I was not married. So I had a completely different experience then. So from start to finish for me was maybe a year and a half. For start to finish for you, Sarah, was about how long? Just it's okay.
Well, I started I honestly can't remember the dates, but I had started taking I took my first test in November and took several exams over the course of 18 months. And then my husband wanted to go back to school, and he was getting a little impatient with me taking so long to take the exam. So I was like, I'm done too. I need a break. So he went and got his master's degree, and it took him about 2 years. And then after he got done, I started right back up again, started studying, and I got my certificate in 2 years later. So all in all, like if you include Robert's time in there, about 6 years.
Okay. Yeah. And Keith, yours was about how long?
So if we're going from I purchased Becker
right.
to I got my final test score May 28th of 2024.
Okay.
So 6 years. If we want to add a couple years of school before that, then
we're not going to.
Yeah. So the bottom line in there is it's different for everybody. Yep. And KP made the comment, it was important that you were testing. I would say to anybody that's listening to this podcast from the perspective of how does this relate to me, I think the important thing is you keep going.
Absolutely.
Keep going. Now, life happens.
Yes.
Obviously. And this isn't in our outline, but Christy, I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Yeah, it's okay. I'd like to.
You've been involved in recruiting. And Sarah made a comment about, or it was Keith, about the employer paying. Just can you briefly comment to someone who's listening that is wants to take the exam, may have an employer, or is coming out of school? What kind of things are out there that employers may do or offer generally?
Well, it depends. Depends on the firm, but some may offer you the course study, Becker, whatever one it is. And that's significant. That's an investment. That's always a perk. When I was recruiting, that was one of the questions I asked. Are you considering the CPA? Do you have any idea how much time and the financial commitment that's going to go in? And
Yeah, because it's not cheap.
They generally knew,
significant.
and that was a setback for a lot of people. And one of the ways that I shared CCK's story was that we believe that if someone is in this industry and they want to go forward, we want to support that. The best part about what I loved in that story was having the camaraderie of people who could guide you, people who are working, who have family, whether their children are small or they're in high school, wherever they are in their life. It was easy to connect with someone who can guide you, who've been there, who can help you avoid some of those pitfalls. And I think it also, one of the ways that I learned the most about people who are testing is that there is such a trap in comparison in anything that we do. And by listening to Sarah's story and to Keith's story is so different than Jeff's. Is one of them better? Absolutely not. When I was recruiting, I wanted to hear a person. I wanted to hear them tell their story. I wanted to know about that journey. I wanted to hear about their resilience because that told me a lot about their character.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
if that's a partner, that's someone I want to partner with as a teammate. And so if anyone is listening, it does not matter where you are in your journey with this grueling certification because it is so hard. But the takeaway is keep going. Because as a recruiter, if I hear someone is testing, I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
If I hear someone started the test, life caught up, great. Are you going to pick it back up? Absolutely. But I probably, my Becker expired. I got to do it again. Well, what's your plan? If they can tell me they have a plan, I'm in.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot that goes into that.
I love Christy used the term grueling. And I don't think the intent for this communication or this podcast is for anyone to go, yeah, it's grueling, so I'm out. We're going to talk a little bit about ultimately what the outcome of that grueling process and journey means and what you feel like. So that's a great description of this process and the journey for each and every person. But before we get there, let's talk about the format because this is something that's changed dramatically.
Yeah.
Again, I took it in 91 and 92. It was I want to think it was a 2.5 day in-person exam, no calculator, no computers. Now, the content of the test has changed over the years, but it was basically, I think it was 4 sections. And one of the sections, it was about a half a day with each section, except for one was like a full day, but they broke it up, I think. But we went down to the Cox Convention Center. There was this, not a moderator, but what was she? The, Proctor.
Yes.
Her nickname was Sarge. I mean, they did everything but pat you down when you walked in there. And you brought this up, Keith, earlier. When I took it, you had to take every part that you had not conditioned for. Now, conditioning was if you had all 4 parts to pass, you passed 2 of them. And if you did that in one sitting, then the next time you could take the other 2 parts. So it's not like you had to take 4 parts every time, but if you went in the first time and you passed 2 parts, you conditioned, then you only had to take the other 2 the next time.
But how many times a year were the...
Twice a year.
Yes.
It was in May and November. And again, it was just, you knew when those were coming up and you knew when the communications were going to come up about passing and failing. But I think when we get into this is the biggest difference is it was, you took every part you hadn't conditioned for, and it was 4 parts in person, moderated, everybody in a big room together. So, Sarah.
Totally different in the younger.
And I will say this, that part of the facts we looked up is that they started using calculators in 1994.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
I want to touch on that. So going back to us completely flying blind, when I first started studying, I thought I was not allowed to use a calculator.
Oh, wow.
And so I spent the first year of studying freaking out because I'm not super great at mental math. And so I was trying to get through the curriculum, working all of the problems, like on
a
scratch paper.
Oh, wow.
Keith. I started doing multiplication tables at home to try to
Did you have
get better.
flashcards?
I'm not a flashcard person. And at one point I talked to somebody in passing and figured out I can use a calculator.
Oh, wow.
And
Then
I was off to the races.
Well,
Nice.
and then let me just say that when that change happened, so I think I passed the exam in 92. So I passed it before calculators were. So, when this change came out, you're like, well, I did mine without a calculator. And I
But
was
the problems changed.
well, they changed. And my thought was, it's going to get easier because you have a calculator. And it was, someone made the comment to me, no, it gets harder because when you didn't have the calculator, the multiple choice could be a little bit more vague, but it's the difference between 100,000 and a million versus when you have the calculator, it gets a little bit more exact. So
right.
Just the difference there. But go ahead, Sarah.
All right. So our exam was not that. We actually had testing windows. There were 4 testing windows in a year. And so you had 2 months, and then you had where you could take the test, and then they had an off window. And you could choose to take all 4 sections in one window, or you could spread that out. Absolutely, I spread that out. There was no way that I could study and take all 4 sections all at once with the volume of study material that there were. Okay,
I'm going to jump in here because you said I'm going to spread that out. It just reminded me of a song back in the 70s and 80s about turn that mother out. You spread that mother out. Yeah,
I spread.
You might want to edit that one into Clarence.
I think Christy does. But so I did elect to take one exam per window. I opted to try and take them as early in the window as possible because you could get your score before the end of that window. So you could it helped plan and manage for when you should and could start studying for the next section. Because I would say that if for instance, I took one section at the beginning of the window and then found out before the ending of the next window that I had failed, then I knew I'm going to try and take that test again. That was kind of my strategy. I'm going to take that next section.
Sarah, how quickly would you find, because this is also, I didn't mention it, but it's a differentiator. How quickly would you find out whether you passed or failed?
Usually within 6 to 7 weeks, because a testing window was 8 weeks.
Okay, because in my situation, it was about that as well, but you only took it twice a year. So,
right.
So there was this, for me, you would, Becker would start back up and you would not know if you passed or failed. So you kind of were like, well, I better start going again in case I didn't pass, but okay.
Right, exactly. So that way, that was kind of like my study strategy as well. So I could plan better on what I wanted to study for. And then we did go to Prometric, and there were lockers. You had to strip everything down and put everything into the locker. When you went into the room, we didn't have, the proctor was not anybody we had a nickname for, but I remember we had to pull out all of our pockets and show that they were inside out and show that we didn't have anything in them. We had a wand that we had to, she wanded us down and to make sure for security purposes that we weren't taking anything into the room. And then our exam was on a computer. So and they were broken. Each section was broken down into further testing modules, and so you could sit through the testing or take through one testing module and kind of take a slight break, and then sit through another testing module, and then that's when you could elect to take a restroom break if you wanted, and you had up to 30 minutes, so it was kind of like your break, and then you had each section is either a 3 or 4 hour testing window. So you could take 2 sections in one day. I did not do that. I just took one section and I took it. Usually I strategized and took it in the morning. I didn't take an afternoon test because I just wanted to get in there and get it done and be able to rest my brain the rest of the day.
So this is something we were going to talk about, but I'm kind of merging it into this. You mentioned it took 6-7 weeks or so.
To get your exam
to get your
Okay.
score. How did you receive that? Was it email? Was it
we had to
snail
we
mail?
had to log in and get Keith. I can't remember it. Do you log into the OSCPA or to the OAB?
So no, the scores come through the NASBA portal.
Okay.
And this was probably the biggest issue that I had, once again, trying to figure out everything on my own. In this process, there's elements that are handled by the OAB, and then there's elements that are handled by NASBA, and it's not clearly explained on how do you apply for exams, how do you pay for exams, how do you schedule it. All of these things are different pieces of paperwork now. And so the OAB has a application window that you have to apply and get approved by the OAB, basically that you're still in standing or in good standing.
Yes.
An eligible candidate. They, of course, tack a nice little fee onto each of those applications. I think it's like $25 or something like that. But so you have to submit that application, get that approved. Once that is approved, then a payment coupon pops up on the NASBA website, and you go over there and you pay for your exam there. And then a day or two later, then a notice to schedule pops up on the NASBA website, which is a form you can use. You take that to Prometric's website, schedule your exam there, and then you stress out until whatever you're.
And then you got to take the exam.
Did
you have to go through the same rigmarole at Prometric that I had
Yes.
to? You have to pull your pockets out and all those things.
And
you can't wear a coat either.
So I had the same three ladies were there from 2021 when I took my first exam to 24 when I took my last one, and I feel bad that I don't know their names. I was always very stressed out on that day.
That's send them Christmas cards.
Yes.
They were closer to like Jeff's age. We'll say that they were on the older side. They were very sweet ladies, though.
Oh yeah. So was your process as far as like just the format much different than what Sara was saying?
Very similar to Sara, although I wonder if the testing windows had changed, and that's also something that NASBA experimented with during my time in the process. So when I first started, we had like a 7-ish week window where you take your exam, and then everybody that took the exam within that testing window, all of their scores were released at the same time. And so my MO was always take it as close to the end of that window because I didn't want to take it on the first day and then wait
out. Yeah.
8 weeks.
8 weeks more.
Yeah. So,
okay.
I would try to time it towards the end. Usually Prometric was booked up around that time. And then you get your results like 2 weeks later and then decide.
So results, we haven't talked about how you get your results.
Yeah.
Well, mine came in the mail. Snail mail. And everybody would know when it was. And this is I'm going to merge this into our next topic as well, because it continues the story for me. But we haven't even really gotten into the format of the test and the nature of the questions, which have changed dramatically. That's a whole other. We'll get our partner John Curzon, who's part of the OAB, on there to talk about that from a information perspective. But so you would get this in the mail, and when I was taking it, the other thing I forgot to mention is I took it on books. I mean, like pamphlets,
right?
And
yes,
you can't see this on the podcast, but you could mail your books back to you. So I actually have
kept it.
I kept my books, and these are the actual CPA exams.
That is amazing.
That I took. Okay,
that is amazing.
So you would mail them back to yourself, and then you would get a snail mail notification. So in November 1991, the first time I took it was I got a 78 in audit. which was passing. At that time, 75 was a passing.
And that is still today.
And they would not give you a score between 71 and 74 or 70 and 74. They wouldn't, like, you didn't get a 72.
Correct. And that's where the weighting comes in.
Yeah. So I had a 78 in audit, a 67 in law, a 67 in practice, and a 65 in theory. So I was like, I passed one. I didn't condition.
What is law, practice,
business law?
theory?
Yeah. What is it? Who knows? That's another, again, that's another podcast episode. So I got two 67s, a 65, and a 78. And in our situation, if you got below a 50, you could not retake right away. So I passed one. And in theory, it was like, nobody passes this exam one time.
Yeah.
The 10 percenters are the people that pass it the first time the entire time. That was the rumor and the theory when I was taking it. So in my mind, I was like, I got 2 more times to take this.
Yeah.
So, and again, you get this like probably about the same time period, 6 to 8 weeks, a snail mail, but everybody knew when it was coming out.
Yeah.
They figured it out.
Yep. Same. We would know too.
So I took it in May then, the next year. So I took it first in November after I got out of school. And then I took it in May, and I was getting married 2 weeks later. And so I took it, got married. It starts coming out. This goes into what this means to you when you pass.
Yes.
Okay. Which we're going to touch on, but I'll never forget, calling my wife from the cubicle at my office and saying, "Did you get it?" She goes, "Yeah." I said, "Read off the scores to me." I'll never forget this. Read off the scores to me. And she said, I've got this here. She said, 77, 81, 75, 75. And I had a lady, I had a supervisor sitting behind me, and she starts screaming, "Did you pass? Did you pass?" I said, "Are you telling me I passed?" I said, wait a second. This has got to be wrong. I said, "There's an envelope that comes in. If you got a thick envelope, it was rumored that you passed because it had all the passing people in it. It had a list of all the qualifying people." I said, "Are you telling me I passed?" And she said, I said, "There should be a list of names."
Mm-hmm.
She goes, I'll never forget. She says, "Yes, and your name is on it."
That's awesome.
And I'm just bummed. I mean, I couldn't believe it because I passed the whole thing at one time.
Yes.
And my wonderful, beautiful, lovely wife of 33 years gives me the most inspiring words I'll never forget. She goes, "Does this mean we can buy a bed now?" Because
awesome.
Our firm had a $400 bonus for passing the exam at the time. But when we asked, what did it mean to you and how did you find out? I'll never forget. Sarah.
Jeff, I mean,
Now
it
you
is.
got me, Jeff. Everything else, you guys, has been like I have been really, really waiting for you to speed it up. And I
Brutal honesty.
I didn't yawn, but now you have me. The impact on every single thing that you guys have been leading up to, right there, Jeff. Mic drop. That's it.
I'm telling
I can't wait to hear what
Sarah.
this did for you guys.
And to lead into that too, Christy, or lean into that is really, it may have been boring and it may have been a little bit grueling to hear and listen to, but that's the process. That's the beauty of the process, that, it is time committing. It takes away from what you probably in your mind may be thinking, what your flesh may be thinking. I would much rather do this as this other thing. But the time and commitment at the end, it's so rewarding. And so it's just like this magnitude of just combination of relief. And confidence building and just an excitement and just euphoria.
Yeah.
So I
Kind of like finishing a marathon, right, Sarah?
Oh, yes. It is exactly like finishing a marathon, which that's something we'll get into next time.
Another
But-
podcast idea.
But like I said, I had taken the exam before, passed a couple of sections, took a break and came back. And sidebar, you have a time limit of taking these tests. And if you don't take them in a certain time period,
Great
which is
point.
18 months, then anything that you passed fall off. You have to pass all 4 sections now in an 18-month window. So when I started back up again, I really had to start all over. And when I started all over. And even in that, I passed a section, and then the next section I would fail, and then I would fail. And so I won't go into how many times I've
Let's say
taken
not.
this section.
Let's not say fail. You didn't pass.
I did not pass. That's right. I didn't pass. And when I got the last score, I remember I was home by myself. Robert had taken the girls to school, and I was still getting ready. That's kind of how our MO at my house. I like to get ready on my own and have the quiet. And I knew the exam scores were coming out that day. And over the course of the morning, I kept logging in, hitting refresh. They weren't there. Hitting refresh. They weren't there. And I remember being in my bathroom in my house and seeing that come across and just staring at my phone, and is this real? Is this a real number? And I even logged out and logged back in because I wanted to, is that really real? And then I even went back and looked at all my other scores to make sure that nothing had changed from before, because I wanted to make sure that all 4 were passed. Jeff, you started those emotions. I feel it bubbling because it's bringing me back, but it's just like, it's just amazing feeling. And after I detail reviewed my scores, I called my husband and I was like, babe, I passed. I did it. And it took him a second. I could hear the pause in his voice. And then it was just this loud noise. And I don't remember if he said anything.
Radio edit.
Right. I don't remember it. There's nothing there. I just remember the relief. And then the cool part is it was a working day. And I just knew everybody here was rooting for me. And I that day I remember. And Krista Murphy made a sign, and it's on, and it says Sara May CPA. And to this day, it is still hanging
there
on my door. So Krista Murphy, shout out to you. I am waiting for you to make me a sign with partner on there. But yes, it was fantastic. I got to celebrate with my family.
Massive celebration.
But I got to celebrate.
Well, and there was an element there that I didn't share. I got my scores in the morning. I immediately grabbed my stuff and I went home. And I remember walking into the apartment at the time, and I just hugged my wife in that celebration. So
yes.
All right, Keith, bring us home, baby.
Mine is very similar to you guys, and it was when I finally passed, it was an extremely emotional event. Let's just say I had the privilege of taking these sections multiple times. We'll just leave it at
character builders.
Yeah, character builder. BEC was the only test that I passed on the first try, but the process for me started as like I need some external validation, to boost my resume and to, help me career-wise. But I quickly realized that it was a very, very difficult process, and it turned into a personal milestone for me of, can I do this? And while I was wrestling with that, my study habits were once I got serious about it, I would work, come home, have dinner with my family, help with the kids. And then at 7:00, I would start studying, and I would study for at least 2 hours. And then I would go to bed at 9, and I would study 5 days a week, most weeks with that pattern. And then I would try to fit in 4 or 5 hours on the weekend. And, while I'm doing that, my wife is picking up quite a bit of slack at home. And so I had this feeling of, I got to do this for her. And she was extremely supportive. Towards the end, it was like, let's get this done. But so, it was a big deal for both of us. And I took them in the order of, we haven't really talked about the individual exams, but FAR, Reg, BEC, and then audit was my last one. And with the first attempt at audit, I got the opportunity to come back and try again. And then I was like, okay, I know what to expect now. and I took audit again, and I did not pass the second time. And that was December of 23. And there was this like, I can't get this close and not
Right.
see this through. And I really struggled with audit, particularly. Audit is a lot more memorization. There's not a lot of, it's what goes on this report and all of that kind of stuff, as opposed to a lot of the other ones are calculations and more in my wheelhouse. And so it took a third try for me to pass audit. In 2024, they experimented with longer testing windows. And so they went from these like monthly windows to they expanded it out to a quarter. And they did this because they replaced the BEC exam with these other 3 new exams. And then for that first quarter, which I took audit for the third time in, they extended the test release out. And so I took it at the end of March, but I didn't find out my results till the end of May. And so I took it and I was like, I think I'm done. And then I think we're done with this process. Let's hope so. And then test results came out, and it was a very emotional, we are done.
Did you work the rest of the day, or did you go home?
I did work the rest of the day because I am a model CCK employee, Jeff.
You're a model CCK teammate.
I am. Yes.
You guys, there's a theme. I mean, outside from the non-CPA, non-accountant person, the level of resilience that goes into this process is off the charts. It doesn't matter where you are. The resilience of picking yourself up, finding the energy, because no one else can control that energy. Other teammates that I've talked to, we all get our energy at different times of day. I know someone who came in at 5 a.m. in the morning because they had young children at home. They needed that time, so they would study for 3 hours so they could go coach football on their kids' team. So there's a way to do it. But I think the heroes that you all continue to praise are the families who support you, whether it's a dad and a husband who realize that a lot of his wife is taking on that role, their partner is taking on that role. A mom, I can speak from a mom, and being a professional, mom guilt is real. And being able to have that support of someone who says, go, I got you. We can do this.
Absolutely.
And it truly is a we. It is a we. And it doesn't matter what anyone is experiencing, whoever is in our audience right now, that there is a way to find a way to pull yourself up by the bootstraps when it looks hard, and whenever you don't pass, and you see other people around you with different results, because our journeys are so different. And I'm going to go back to stay as far away from the trap of comparison.
Yeah.
Because the pain that you experience in the journey is never wasted.
Well, Christy, in the 30 years that I've been a CPA, never once have I compared scores with anybody.
Nope. Never.
It's never a question. It's never even come. I mean, I've never even thought about that. It's your CPA, period.
Yeah.
So as we get close to wrapping up here, last question, what does it mean to you today in 1 or 2 sentences? For me, it's, I did it. It's what I've been as a professional for 30 years. And thanks, Dad.
For me, it is an accomplishment, and it is a testimony of what the support that I had from my husband and my girls, and showing them that you can do it whenever you're ready.
Yeah. I mean, you guys basically said what I was going to say, but yeah, I mean, it's a personal accomplishment, and then also, a testimony to the support that I've had from my wife and the team here at CCK. I talked about flying blind prior to coming here. Once I got here, I immediately was supported by other people that were going through the same thing. So,
or had gone through the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just like a marathon, I think we're done. I know we're going to edit some of this out potentially, but I think as Christy mentioned, we got where we needed to be, and really it would be my heart's desire, and I think our heart's desire, that someone listening to this would feel encouraged, feel like they're understood, like they're just part of the gang that goes through this process. And maybe in some strange way, we have an impact on that. So just like we mentioned last episode, if you have any thoughts or comments or questions or just want to reach out, I don't know if we still have the personalized autographed tumbler, but again, the first person that from outside our firm that emails us gets a signed CCK tumbler signed by me, Mays, and KP, and to show off at your firm or whatever. But if you want to connect with us, do so that way. And
It's at podcast
at
cckcpa.com.
Thank you. That's why we have teammates. We complete each other's sentences.
We lean in. Yeah,
Podcast at cckcpa.com. As always, we want to thank CCK as our sponsor, Christy as our producer, Robert Mays for the intro, outro music, Clarence Fisher with Tulsa Internet Marketing Services, our sage, our guru, our guide, and our IT teammate, Lee Dollenberg, for the audio visual engineering expertise. But we also want to thank you, Keith. I want to think that as this podcast develops and grows, that those that sit on the mic are divinely appointed through relationships and connecting the dots. And I believe you were one of those people today. And so thank you for sharing your story. And with that, we'll say goodbye. Be sure to tune in next time when these two CPAs sit down with someone and you find out who's on the mic.
The information provided on this podcast is for general informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute accounting, tax, legal, or financial advice. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, laws and regulations change and individual circumstances vary. Always consult with a qualified CPA or professional advisor before making any financial or business decisions. The views expressed by the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of any organizations they are affiliated with. Listening to this podcast does not create a client-accountant relationship. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge and agree to those terms. And that's a wrap for this episode of Two CPAs in the Mic. If you found today's episode helpful, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Have questions or ideas for a topic? Reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at podcast@cckcpa.com.